Thanks for tuning in, guys. You're listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Rahul Jani, and I'm here with Leon Everett. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Ace Comicals episode 77. I'm joined by Leon Everett and we're sailing the ship alone without our captain Greg Driver today because he's busy making really adult life decisions and we're left to fend for ourselves. But we're going to talk about some video games, we're going to talk about some TV shows, we're going to talk about some films, and ultimately we're going to talk about a comic that we spoke about a year and a half ago now called Crowded. And there's one full trade paperback volume which we're going to discuss, and let's take it from there. So, Leon, how have you been?
Not too bad, not too bad. It feels like only yesterday that we did our last recording. So, yeah, it's a weird feeling. I guess it's, as well, that is accentuated by the fact that I saw a movie with you recently. But otherwise, yeah, things have been good. Things have been good.
Yeah, we spent too much time together. I need to get away from it more. That's what it is.
That is the problem.
Every time I talk to you, feels like we're recording something. So.
I am every time. B-roll.
Did you want to talk about the film that we watched?
Yes, so on Friday, we checked out Rian Johnson's latest movie, Knives Out, which, if you paid attention to any trailers or heard anything about it, in general, it's a whodunit, and it stars Daniel Craig, Lakeith Stanfield. I don't even want to say any more, actually, because there's some actors who appeared in this, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know you were in this, and it was a delightful surprise. But yeah, it was, overall, I really enjoyed it. I think what it does smartly is that it runs counter to what you're expecting going in, and I won't go into detail with what I mean about that, but I think you're going to get a different film than you're expecting when you walk in if you've seen any marketing or anything like that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought that it played around with the genre conventions of your, say, murder mystery, especially ones to do with like families. And yeah, it was good fun, and I would highly recommend checking it and just going in blind, really. I think you're going to get a good movie doing that. The music, which was done by Nathan Johnson, who's Ryan's brother, was really good. It's really subtle as well, but it plays on elements of the genre, like your typical sort of Agatha Christie adaptation type, and it sort of leaps forward from there and takes lefts where you're expecting rights, and all in all, I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, got to agree. I had a really good time at the cinema watching that. I think, like you said, I wouldn't want to spoil people going into it, because all I knew about it is that it was a murder mystery and that it was directed and written by Rian Johnson, and I'm here for everything that he does. Really. The thing you were talking about, it countering your expectations, I super have to agree with. I think I really enjoyed how it does that. Like, he's taken the time to consider what we would go in thinking and find a really interesting, but not like up his own butt sort of way to like flip stuff on the head. It's not like winking aggressively at you through the screen. I think it's really nicely done, and it doesn't treat the audience as like dumb, because there's moments where I think I was doing that thing in my head where you like when you're watching a murder mystery, you're trying to piece it together yourself and you're trying to figure out the twists and turns, and it finds a really good balance of making you feel smart but then not shoving it in your face when it reveals something that you probably didn't think of. And
definitely.
It left me feeling really satisfied because of that. I didn't feel dumbed down, and I also didn't feel like I figured it all out from the get-go. And even the times when I did figure stuff out, I felt like it was so like well crafted and well written that it didn't feel like I'd got one over the film as well at the same time. And it's a really, really interesting balance to strike. And I think super held up by the performances, like a great cast, which again, like I don't really want to reveal, like you said, because people you don't realize who are in it, but like all of the main actors did a stellar job at like playing this insidious family like mystery drama, and I really enjoyed it. I would recommend people checking it out for sure.
And also spoke about it sort of briefly last episode, so I won't go into mega detail on this episode, but just the last 2 episodes of HBO's Watchmen that have aired since we last recorded. Just want to give those a special shout out. Again, this is a hard one to talk about until we actually do our post episode 9 deep dive and reappraisal of the whole season. But I will just add that I think that the last episodes were some of the strongest, and I think part of that is down to them being more character pieces, in the sense that they're focused almost primarily on one character for the duration of their episodes, and by doing that they get to delve in deep with some quite explosive subject matter. There's that, because they're taking quite big swings, there's like so much risk inherent into some of the stories they're telling, but I think that a deft hand is being used, especially in context of things such as, say, generational trauma, and like the passing on of that, and the sort of cyclical nature of some of those elements. And I'm really looking forward to properly like digging in, because there's a lot of meat on this bone. And with these episodes, well, I watch them and I get the pang straight after. I was like, I need to talk to somebody about this. I need to discuss what I've just seen, because there's a lot of wild imagery that is a treat if you're a person who's read the book, but also a treat if you're just going in cold with this show for the first time and you have no idea what's going on in terms of the references being made to the original text. And I think they're walking that tightrope really, really well. And I'm really surprised, like positively, in some of the territory they're taking on, and how expertly they're handling it. And even from a non-thematic or like metaphorical perspective, just the filmmaking in these episodes is phenomenal.
Yeah, episode 6 in particular, like, I mean, they've all been quite visually arresting, and they've all done every episode I think so far has done some really interesting things with using really striking imagery or finding something that's beyond what you'd normally find in television. Because I think I mentioned this to you maybe on cast, but like the closest touchstone I have to that is Legion, for example, and possibly Euphoria. It does some of that trippiness, but also it's really carving out its own visual style, which is unique to both of those two things I mentioned earlier. Like I don't know how they're finding this new visual voice, but it's really cool. And episode 6 in particular does some really interesting stuff, and like some good, really interesting one shot long takes, and like tying all these different shots together is really clever.
Yeah, I think you mentioned on pod or off pod about how the some of the blocking and the shot construction is invokes like comic book panels so strongly, but not in a sort of cheesy on the nose way, but in a way that really builds up what's happening in front of us and also ties it to its like roots.
Yeah, a lot of things like your traditional match cuts and stuff in cinema, but doing it in a way that just feels like you have the similar sort of thing with comic book panels, where you can have the framing of one panel match the framing of the next. I don't know, there's just something really elegant about how it merges cinematic storytelling and like visual static storytelling on screen that I'm really impressed by. And maybe it's just because I'm more attuned to comic books than your average TV viewer, perhaps. But I feel like I'm picking up on the more comic booky side of it than the cinema side of it. I don't know. There's a lot of really striking things like that.
Yeah, it's like a lot of really good like shot composition or the uses of color. There's so much that could be said about the subtleties, but also the non-subtle like framing that we're seeing. There's a lot of good stuff going in there. This is a thing where early on we've been wondering if it's such. They've bitten off so much. We're wondering if they've bitten off more than they can chew. And the worry at the beginning of all of this was if Lindelof could stick the landing. And we'll find out properly in like 3 episodes or so. But I think for what they've done so far, what they've accomplished, what they've aimed for and done, even if things completely like go to shit in the last episode or something like that, I think it's worth it for where we've got to so far. And I would say for now, I think him and his writer's room are sticking the landing.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I was already in because it was Damon Lindelof, and I have such an affection for his previous works, particularly The Leftovers, which you've also expressed how much you enjoy that show. And I think from the get-go, the Watchmen, it brings up some topics, like some cultural topics and some current anxieties, which really give you pause and makes you think, I really want them to do this justice and like have the right people in the room, have the right writers actually, fulfill this promise. And I'm being vague deliberately because I don't want to spoil anything, but that anxiety, which I think was quite high from the first episode, I think has slowly diminished, and I have more and more trust in what he and his writers are doing with this show. And it's funny you bring that up because that reminds me of the next thing I wanted to talk about. So the two things we talked about right now are a murder mystery and a socially conscious story, which possibly has gives you the idea that it might not be paying off the things that it's collecting from the get-go, but then ultimately you feel more and more comforted by it. That really reminds me of a game that I've been playing recently called DISCO ELYSIUM, or DISCO ELYSIUM, which we both found for the first time a couple of years ago at Rezzed EGX, I believe. Was it 2017, 2018?
I think it was the 2017, I think.
God, it's a while ago, yeah. I remember us both just pausing in front of the multiple screens they had set up, where it was so Disco Elysium is a top-down isometric RPG, I guess. At its face, it looks like your classic Baldur's Gates, your Planescape Torments. And it does essentially follow that same structure. It's top-down, you click around a map and you lead your party to, talk to different people and discover the world. And the thing that I really enjoyed about this game was that it's very combat minimal while keeping these RPG mechanics. So the whole thing about this game is you play a really down in his luck cop who wakes up with the hangover of all hangovers and has a conveniently amnesiac episode where he can't remember who he is, what he did, and it allows the opportunity to talk to people in this fantastical, but not semi-sci-fi, semi-fantasy, but also hewing to alternate universe politics world. And it just affords the opportunity to explore all these very different, colorful cast of characters with a colorful cast of politics, and lets you choose how to engage with them. So let me roll back a little because I didn't explain who this is by. So it's a game that came out recently. I think it was end of October 2019 by Games. That's AZ/UM Games. And it's a... I don't know exactly where the studio is based, but I know that the lead writer, who is called Robert Kurvitz, is a Karelian-Estonian writer. And they've been working on this project for, I think, a good 10 years. I think they developed it first as a tabletop RPG or a D&D tabletop game system. And they've since developed it into a novel which hasn't actually yet been released. Or maybe it was written in, I think, Russian. I could be wrong about that, but it's certainly not been translated into English yet. And I think they're currently in the process of translating it into English. And then they've also developed it into this game that they've been working on. And the reason I wanted to talk about it on this cast is because it really has a comic bookiness in its art, in how fluid and painted and iridescent and murky the visuals are, but it also has like touchstones to things like Die, because it is like the comic book Die by Kieran Gillen, because it has these like D&D trappings, because essentially every interaction you have with a person is governed by like dice rolls. So you have multiple parts of your inner monologue which are represented as different skills, and every time you talk to somebody, you are constantly, the system is constantly rolling dice to do a check against whether this particular aspect of your personality is engaging with the conversation you're having with this person. So you can be talking to a like a distraught mother, and secretly in the background, your character will be rolling a dice against his empathy skill, and whether your empathy is high enough or not will determine whether your inner monologue will pick up on something that this woman is engaging with in her life that, you know, you may or may not have noticed if your empathy was low. And it's a really interesting system. And the thing I really like, the thing that I had in mind when I was playing it was that unlike a film and unlike a book, but very much like a comic, it allows you to experience these multiple moments which are perceived simultaneously. So you're looking at a comic book page and you get to look at the entire spread of moments, which may or may not encompass, you know, minutes or hours or weeks or even just seconds. Disco Elysium's like internal dialogue presents the same compression and expansion of moments that I get from a comic book. Like, you know, you can scan back and forth over a page. In Disco Elysium, you get this thing where your internal monologue suddenly pauses the gameplay, and you have this whole conversation in your own head, in literally in game. Like your internal monologue is explained out in text, and you can have this whole dialogue with yourself in which can take like minutes of your own real life time, but represents only, you know, seconds of consideration within the game. And like, I don't know, there's something about that really did feel very comic booky to me, in combination with the comic booky visuals. And I don't know, it feels, there's moments in this game which feel like a visual novel that you get to control. Like you get to unfurl the moments and discoveries at your own pace. You can be given a reveal and then have time to chew on it, scroll back through the text and choose how to feel before proceeding. And that's even before you get to the point of it being a visual novel / RPG type game, where you have to make decisions about how your character feels and reacts to the world around him. And so to bring it back to what you were saying about Watchmen and whether or not Lindelof is, you know, that anxiety about him sticking the landing, that this game gave me a very similar sense of, like, from the get-go, I had to persist past a point where I could feel that the designers and the writers and the artists were acting in good faith, because it's a game that from the get-go lets you interact with awful people and then gives you the opportunity to agree with them. Like, this is, I don't want to spoil anything because I know that you haven't played it, but you intend to play it. This is maybe opening 30 minutes spoiler, but like one of the first people you encounter is a racist nationalist. And one of the ways that you can progress through the story, because that person is presenting a barrier, is to take on their ideology, take on their racist ideology, and agree with him so that he considers you an ally and he lets you pass. Yeah. And like, if I would forgive anyone, I'm very understanding of anyone who would bounce off of this game from that interaction alone. But I persisted because I got the sense that they were acting in good faith. And it turns out, I think, that all of these opportunities for picking what I would consider an objectively awful or morally corrupt choice are appropriately weighed in the game. And I think they're being very deliberate, because it's very easy to read this as, without getting too muddled in the topic, like, your protagonist is an irresponsible mess, and he has the opportunity for, like, falling into moral corruption or having redemption through the convenience of this amnesiac plot that he's going through. Except it's not convenient. The only one who's forgotten his behavior is himself. You know, everybody else in the world around him is fully cognizant of all of the crap that he's done to get him to the point that he, you know, like essentially he's drunk himself into forgetfulness. And you as the player get to choose what you do with that. And you can make all these right or wrong choices, but essentially it only affects how you feel in that moment. So what I'm getting at is that you're reacting to all these people around you, and I think it's an exploration of what it means to make the worst and the best choices in yourself. And it's a really interesting story. I feel like it's a really mature plot and a really mature exploration of somebody who is at one of the worst points in his life and what it requires, the energy that it requires to become a better person. So I'm gonna end that point there. The other thing that I want to talk about is how it's, despite it being essentially a murder mystery plot, and I'm not going to go into any plot details about that, but I feel like it's a murder mystery plot with the giving the opportunity to talk about politics, and it's an extremely political game, except for the fact that there's only 4 points on its moral compass. You can either be an out-and-out communist, an out-and-out fascist, an out-and-out ultra-liberal capitalist, or a laughable centrist, I think is the way the game calls it. And initially, my frustration with the game is that it only lets you be the extreme compass points. Like, you have to be the
ask about this.
So it does essentially, it gives you this multitude of options, but you have to play on the extreme ends of all of these compass points. But the longer I played, the more confident I felt that in the presentation of only the extreme options, the nuances don't come from the protagonist, but from the supporting cast. Like, you're playing this middle-aged, drunk white dude. And I don't know, I feel like that's informing the choices that you get to play through, like these extreme points, because he's essentially, despite being down on his luck, he's in a position of privilege. And then he gets to talk to this cast of characters who introduce all the complexities and the moral grays about those particular political alignments. And I think given enough time with this game, I think it's so smart. It's so clever, and it knows it's very intentional with what it's doing.
Do you get like a sort of like Mad Maxy vibe, where like Max himself is, I guess, Orange is the New Black as well, where the main characters are like the vessel to open up all these conversations and like topics?
I think initially, yes. I think for the first like few hours of the game, that is exactly it. He feels like the blank slate that you can bounce your, like, as a player, your political ideology off, and then see how other people react to you playing through that ideology. But as the game progresses, I feel like it becomes more complex. I think it does more. It transcends the Mad Max thing that you just described. I think it has its cake and eats it, but like, it's a really fulfilling meal. Like, you know, I wonder if there's a better phrase to describe that, because like, it feels like it's having its cake and eating it at the start, but it earns that cake at the end. Like, I feel like it goes through this whole process, and then it ultimately tells a better story by showing you how this blank slate is crafted by your decisions throughout the entire game. And I'm so in love with this game. I can't express just how many moments of like pathos and like sadness and happiness and all of these things that it drew out in me. And it has some of my favorite storytelling moments, let alone video game moments, just storytelling moments from all of the media that I've seen in the last year, I believe. I'm going to have to sit down and think about it in the context of like my decade, since everyone's talking about looking past the decade, but it's really up there. It's really up there as one of my favorite things that I've experienced in recent times, for sure. I'd urge everybody who's got the patience to sit and read in front of their computer. I would really suggest playing this game, and I think it's coming to consoles next year as well. So, yeah,
I'm looking forward to giving that a try. I've bumped it higher up the list than a game released when it should be. So get to it sooner rather than later.
And like, I hope that they're going to bring out some DLC for it. I don't think they've been. It's not part of the plan they've described. It's not like an EA game where you know that there's going to be these particular things at different milestones being released. I think they've hinted at the idea of maybe expanding on the world, and they're going to release the book that is set, I think, 20 years after the game's events.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to that coming out next year. Off of the back of this, I've really been wanting to engage with more stuff that's kind of like set in the same style of world. So I've been reading a book by China Mivel. I don't know if you have heard of this
I
guy.
have, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the first time I encountered his name was from a story called The Three Body Problem. I think that was his, which I learnt about off the back of Arrival. I think maybe they were talking about how that story was similar to this story, but the book I've picked up since Disco Elysium is The City in the City. So hopefully by the next recording I'll have finished that, and I'll talk about that when I get there. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or shall we move on to our review for this week, which is Crowded?
Let's jump in.
Yeah, so Crowded. We decided to read Volume 1, which covers issues number 1 to number 6. We actually spoke about issue 1 back in August of 2018. I can't believe it's a year and a half ago that we talked about issue 1. I didn't realize it had gone on that long. At the time of recording, which is the start of December, I think they're on 10 issues right now. But yeah, we talked about issue 1 in August of 2018, which was episode 42 of Ace Comicals. This is a book written and designed by Christopher Sabella, pencils by Rose Steen, inks by Ted Brandt, colors by Treon Farrell, and letters by Cardinal Ray. And it's an Image comic, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That's true.
Right. So it's got everything going for it, all of the stuff that we like. So yeah, dive in. Where did you want to jump off from where we talked about this in issue 1? I think we were both quite, and Greg as well also read this. I think we were all quite high on this book from issue 1.
Yes, to sort of bounce off from something that I mentioned last time we spoke about it, which was episode 42, I believe. I mentioned it in relation to the season 3 opener of Black Mirror, which was Nosedive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the episode where everyone rated each other, and everybody had an app. And every interaction you had to think about, even if it was at a negative to yourself, to be nice to someone else, that they would give you like 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
And in tying that with that main concept of this, where in this you have the Reaper app, and people can basically kickstart a hit on you if they're for whatever reason, and then the person who gets that hit will get all the kickstarted money, and I think Reaper take 40% or something like that. So in a world where you have that worry. But this is where I also thought that actually the final episode of that season of Black Mirror ties in really well, which is Hated in the Nation, which is the feature length one at the time.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, with that, it was a case where bloodthirsty hashtags would end up getting people targeted by semi-spoiler for episode Artificial Bees. And in the way that the show examines the I guess the inflated endpoint of a culture. I guess in that thing it was like an early comment on like cancel culture, I guess, and how that can be wielded to doom, because it's like a judge, jury, and executioner on social media.
Yeah, like the flawed wisdom of crowds kind of thing.
Yeah, and the sort of mob mentality that you can get with that, where it becomes self-perpetuating. I think what Crowded does, and does more efficiently, is look into the more broader societal endpoints of that. I guess not even endpoints really, but more the eventualities and all the sort of tangential elements to that. Because in the basic conceit of this, it isn't just a cancel culture thing. It's a world where the gig economy like rules large and seems to be like the number one front-facing storefront of capitalism, and rather than it being like a sort of fable or a parable of like the dark ends of what happens if somebody is people take issue with something somebody's done. What this sort of brings up is actually all the different elements that could lead into that, and what would happen if like law enforcement and the government and legislation was wrapped up in this. And through doing that, I think what it does is broaden out and generalize the causes that lead to a thing like this, rather than it just being a Twilight Zone. Or imagine there was an app where people could kill you Running Man style.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's not just about, hey, look at this crazy app. It's more about like how the gig economy affects everything. Like the logical extreme of introducing this kind of system to the world, and then how that can affect all the different facets of it. Like you were saying, it's like it infects law, government, legislation. It affects all of that. It's not just this one isolated crazy thing that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if for people who have no idea, if you wanted to do like a basic general rundown of what the hell this book is about.
I mean, so we hinted at it, but it's essentially about a woman called Charlotte Ellison, or Charlie for short, who has had a hit put out on her through a gig economy app called Reaper, where she wakes up one day to the app itself having accumulated $1.2 million worth of funding from over 2,000 people who want her dead. And this is a thing that happens often in this society. It's not a new thing. People have been essentially kickstarted for death in the past. It's something that is known in the world. It's something it's set in America. It's just a thing that happens now. But it seems to have started by, because I think they hint at this halfway through the issue, halfway through the volume, where it's like really rich, famous, or like corporation heads and stuff like that, where they get to like have crowdfunded by the public, like these decisions to murder these people sent out to the populace. It's not normally used to target like low-level individuals
at that high level.
Yes, at such a large like monetary value. Normally these things fizzle out. There's certain specific rules, like you have to get the hit out. The hit has to be accomplished within 30 days, otherwise you can never target that individual again. It's all governed by law. The police know about it. It's all it's intertwined with the way that the policing is done throughout the country. But yeah, the fact that this individual who doesn't know or is unwilling to admit to the audience what she did to earn this ire, the fact that she has accumulated $1.2 million worth of like a hit on her is wild. So she, in response to this, she takes out she joins another app which is called Defender, and requests the services of our second protagonist, Vita Slatter, as bodyguard services. And so we're basically following Charlie and Vita through this adventure. And Volume 1 essentially covers the first 3 days of the 30-day period where Charlie has this hit out on her.
Yeah.
Which was my not very brief way of introducing the story.
No, I think you covered a lot of the bases without getting into the weeds. But yeah, it's like we've mentioned on the previous ep, there's a lot of fascinating things about this. The way the world was built in the first issue is really economical and efficient. Long-time listeners will know that I often balk at issue ones because I always feel like they've only given me barely a beginning. Like it feels like they've given me a quarter of a chapter, and so I always feel like the jump to like going to issue 2 is a bigger jump because I don't feel I've got anything in issue 1. But I felt that the issue 1 of this was really effective in setting up the stakes of the world and giving you world building without pointing at it. Like you don't really get exposition in this until I think issue 2 or 3, and even that is done in a semi-lamp shaded way. But I think what carries you through the first issue is not just what a compelling setup it is, but also how three-dimensional the characters appear, despite it being really easy for them to sort of fall into tropes, and how well the character design is, and how the world, despite being like a sort of capitalist dystopia, is still a functioning world, and there's a lot of color. Like the book isn't ugly to read, despite the core concept being quite an ugly thing, and that mixed in with the like sprinkling of like comedy and absurdity, off a lot of which is the whole 10 minutes into the future thing, but instead of it just being 10 minutes into the future of all these particular ideas, it feels like 10 minutes into the future of like every element. So it's like 10 minutes is the future of the gig economy, 10 minutes into the future of like app usage, 10 minutes into the future of like influencers and like live streaming, and 10 minutes into the future on the entanglement that law enforcement government has with all these sort of too big to fail capitalist extremities. And I think a lot of that works to elevate it beyond a base commentary you could have, where it's like, oh, these millennials and their apps, blah blah. It's like you can tell this is written by people who are part of the world that we have now, where we're extremely online, going from one app to one app, where you're in your Uber home and you're on Postmates if you're in America, or Deliveroo here, ordering dinner so that it arrives 10 minutes after you get in, and then you load up your smart TV and all of that like feeds into it each other, and it feels like what this book handles is like the logical next step of a lot of these things if gone unregulated.
Yeah, like unchecked technology and unchecked privatization.
Yeah. And I think that with that topic, there's a lot of different ways you can go around sort of bringing it to the image in a way, because it's a lot of ideas, like I was saying, that could be handled fairly flatly or one-dimensionally. But I think that by digging into these characters, and over the course of these 6 issues, we find out more about the world, but more about the characters. So, like, starting off, the first person we sort of meet is like Charlie, who, like, in the first issue, we see that she has like 11 jobs or so. In one day, she'll do 11 app-based jobs, and part of that is like obviously a commentary on the world that that is taking place, but also something that I didn't really pick up on the first time reading just the first issue was what commentary it is on her, because she has a dialogue with Vita in that first issue where it's like, oh, you only have one job type thing, where and part of, because the thing is, she's quite a narcissistic and like she had quite a myopic outlook, and part of that is formed in a world where you're rated by others, and it's also formed in a world where, say, Instagram has become king, and it's all about checking in and saying I was at this place, but it's not actually really about enjoying the thing. So, and she's like I mentioned before, she's quite impetuous. She often leaps without thinking, and I think part of the core odd couple setup we have with these two lead characters, a lot is mined out of the fact that she will just do things, despite the fact that there is a over $1 million hit out on her head. Like if it was me, I would be hunkering down. I would be like Mr. Robot, hard drives and phones in a microwave, and sleeping under a bed for 30 days. But her, she like wants to go out, and part of the comedy is like Vita allows her to go out instead of just handcuffing her to in her basement or something like that. So, but what we get from her going out is that we get a deeper look into who she is, because I think one of the criticisms you could have, and what people often have when they talk about unlikable characters, especially if they're like protagonists, is why should I care? Like, why should I care if someone puts a bullet in her head? Like, she's really annoying person. And I think what the book does is, one, we spend a lot of interior time with Vita and like other characters, which I think sets up the idea that it isn't just about like good people, bad people, or whatever. This is about a system and the tentacles of the system and who it intersects with, and how different people are using the system to survive or for their own ends. And one of the things that I find quite interesting with Charlie is that she seems to be able to gel with people quite easily. Like, I think it's issue 5 where she sneaks off and ends up on like a hen do, talking with like a future bride and hanging out with all of her people, and ending up in like a strip club. It's called Bifurous, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is fantastic name and a fantastic shout out to Scott Pilgrim. But
not the only shout out to Scott Pilgrim I noticed, by the way.
No,
book,
yeah,
but,
yeah. And what I thought was really cool there is how, yeah, she's able to become people's best friends really easily. She's one of those people who has like a bubbly, fun energy, and I think part of that comes from the fact that she leaps first and is easy, gets people in their feelings talking, and she's able to just to get on with people so well, and that explains how she can how she can function so highly on like so many apps, because there's the friend app where people hire your time to hang out with them, and like she wouldn't do well on apps like that if she was someone who is unfun to be around. But then what we also explore with her over the course of these 6 issues is that her narcissism and myopic nature like rub people the wrong way, and while she could be your best friend on the night, she's likely a person who is unconcerned with or like oblivious to what her words or actions, like the effects they have on you. And so
and this is doubled down by the fact that early on she gets a list of all the people who have put a hit out, who have contributed to this hit on her, and many of them seem to be her friends.
Yeah,
and that becomes a plot point early on in the volume.
To the level where we even get this character called Trotter, who we'll go into later. There, he has sort of puts up like a sort of reel of like loads of people talking about her who don't like and saying why they like jumped in on the hit.
Yeah, including her own mum, which is
So,
savage. Yeah.
like the thing that's harsh here ends with like her mum saying, "Whatever you do, don't come home," which is savage.
Mm.
It's like not anything like I don't like you, but I'll support you type thing, but more case of like your problems are not my problems, and it goes to I don't know, explore like a damage that she has, and
it's interesting because it's a damage that we kind of only get to see the surface of, because like with her interactions with Vita, she doesn't seem ultimately awful. She doesn't seem like the type of person who you'd want to put money to murder because of her actions. She might be like a bit much, you know, like in commas, or she might be like an extreme extrovert, or like, you know, be constantly haranguing, but she doesn't seem evil or awful.
Yeah,
or, you know,
she's like the person who'd be like an annoying housemate, where they would just do annoying things like not put the milk back in the fridge, or like take stuff and then not replace them. At the worst, have a party without telling you on a weeknight type thing. But she doesn't seem like the type of person who's stealing from you, or is like backstabbing you, or like stuff of that nefarious nature.
And that is one of the driving mysteries of this book, is why does she have the hit out on her, which we ultimately don't really get a good answer for in these first 6 issues.
Yeah, and like she's holding in answers that she have that are more a case of like, everyone hates me a little bit, I guess, but we know that there's more like a core actions or relationship that she's had, which would have a knock-on effect more than just a couple of people not liking her, to get up to like what ends up, I think, at the end of these 6 issues is 2 million.
Yeah, and I've got a point to make on that, which we can get in later. So remind me to go back to like the values of how much, you know, how much people have got a hit out on her. But yeah, continue.
But yeah, it's I quite like that, because in terms of, I like that they make her like not just a trope character.
And like because to speak to the thing that you said about how her being the type of person who operates on all these different jobs at the same time, the fact that she does an Airbnb service, an Uber service, a car lending service, a clothes lending service, a dog walking service, a babysitting service, a calculus tutoring service, a money lending service, which is really interesting because that's one that we don't currently have in our world, where individuals can lend money at like a short-term interest rate kind of thing.
Like payday loans, but like the gig economy version.
Yeah, it's crazy. The you know, the Power Rent one, which is like renting a friend for an hour. The thing that informs about her gets seeded early on, and then it pays off really well in the issue where she goes on that hen do, and she's in a situation where she's really close to actually being killed, like for that goal to be accomplished. And she says, in tears, and what I can only assume is extremely genuine and not a ploy on her part, but she says, "I've got so much to live for." And in the background is all the scenes we saw at the start of issue 1, where she's going through all of these, you know, these gig apps that she's doing. And like, if she's being genuine, the things that she does live for are those individual jobs, those individual moments. We see the flashback from when she's sitting with an old man on the bench who has hired her to, you know, be her friend for an hour. The fact that she's walking these dogs for these strangers, like those are the things that fulfill her life.
It's not slog. It's not a slog for her. She enjoys the different elements of these jobs that she has.
And like, that's the thing that gives her meaning. And like, I like that it's not just like the fact that it goes deeper into criticizing the gig economy beyond, isn't it awful how everything is as an app now. Yeah, the fact that it can have meaning to somebody, that it does have value beyond just the monetary, like the capitalist thing that it's critiquing, I think is really smart.
Well, yeah, exactly, because just to not sideline, I guess, but just to jump into one of those in a bit of detail without getting derailed too much, the friend renting one, the Power Rent one, is in concept a really good service if you remove the fact that it's like a money service. because there's obviously loads of downsides to that, and I'm sure like a billion boomer articles about why millennials are ruining the world in there inherently. But there is a lot of benefit to people who are isolated, especially if you're like in a big city. You just moved to a big city, and you might have some form of anxiety, or you're just not a gregarious person anyway. But you want to like meet someone in a we're going on a date Tinder way. You just like to spend an hour or two with someone who's got some of the same interests, and just hang out without it being like a particular thing, without you having to join this like after work club or something like that. And the fact that you don't even have to talk to anybody until you get there. But there's so many benefits of like having an app where like you can just pick the things that you want and get them, that having one where it's like, this person has got a good rating and seems to like a lot of these things, this would be cool. It'd be nice to get out of the house and hang out. That concept is really, really nice. And I know that some other nations already have something similar, like less apps and more services where you have like a companion, a platonic companion for like half a day or something like that. And I think there's a lot of good you can get from a service like that. That isn't just where the evaluation isn't just a thing of like, oh man, look at society, we can't even talk to people anymore. Everything's an app. Everyone's behind a computer, not talking to anyone. It's like,
yeah, because the point of these apps is to get someone else to do the heavy lifting for you, right? So when it comes to finding a friend, you want someone who is social and gregarious, and like to take the heavy lifting off someone who might be an introvert or might be in a position where it's hard to meet people, like this old man who just wants someone to feed the pigeons with, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I like that we get that flavor in this, and it isn't just this one-sided polemic.
Yeah, for sure. Then again, on the flip side, we have like the ultra dystopian thing where it's, what if the fire services were privatized, and when your old vintage I don't know what the right word is, but a really old house is beautiful and made out of wood and like 5 stories high is on fire, and you turn up there and you realize that the fire service is waiting for you to get there, so you can make the choice between water or like toxic foam that it has 65% more chance of saving your belongings. They haven't taken action because they want to see which one you're willing to fund for them. That's the other side of that, where like that's the ultimate dystopia, where the services that are there to help you are not inherently there to help you.
Yeah, it's just another business.
And it's awful. That like made me feel sick watching that or reading that, because it's the ultimate betrayal of the society that you're taking a part in. Like of all of the things, the fire service should be the thing that like just reacts to fire. You react to fire immediately. You know,
I mean, it's one of those things that we rightfully view as a right, where it's like if you're hurt, no matter what what country you're in and what your insurance, like how your healthcare system is set up, at the very least, if you're hurt, you can call a number and an ambulance will come and get you. And not like the cyberpunk thing of like them having to scan you before they even send an ambulance. And
yeah, it's
weird to think that one of these pillars of society could just be shifted in that way, because it's all like, it's super scary to just have like a McDonald's which has no one in there at all, and you just press some buttons and it comes out of a machine, which we're like halfway there currently with McDonald's. That's like one side of like, oh, automation has taken off, but like the fact that your like financial standing will have some sort of say in who's willing to save you or your belongings is it's awful.
We haven't actually gone into detail about the other cast of characters in this comic. So like beyond just Charlie and Vita, we do get introduced to the interesting cast of the people who are actually acting on the hits and the legislature behind those. So we have like the first person that she meets who attempts to kill her is this like seemingly cute little old lady with a tiny dog who just points a gun in her face, and like the way that Charlie gets away is by like throwing like a boiling cup of coffee in her face and running off, and like inexplicably stealing her dog for whatever reason, which causes problems later on. But like there's some really interesting characters that this affords, like so interesting scenarios, like so you have people who you wouldn't generally expect to want to be, like you wouldn't expect as hitmen or hit people, so like this old lady, or like the things that it enables. So there's one which I thought was really interesting, which is like you have tourist buses that take you on tours of the city, but instead of it being a tour of the city, it's a tour of people who have hits out on them. So underneath your seats in this open top bus, you have a machine gun, and you can take pot shots at the person who is like has the hit out on them. So there's one point where Charlie and Vita are trying to escape from the city, and they just have this tourist bus chasing after them with a bunch of like foreign tourists shooting them from the top of this bus. And there's some really clever interactions from that kind of stuff. I don't know if any jumped out at you.
Well, it's funny you bring that one up because when I was in New York recently, there was a bus going around that was like a sightseeing bus, but instead of it being like open top, sort of standard, you look out the windows, instead everybody was sat in like tiered theatrical seating, and then there was a window just on one side of the bus.
What?
So it was like if you were standing directly outside of the bus, it would be like everyone was just looking directly at you. So it was this weird dystopian, almost Lynchian theatrical viewing of New York that people were having.
Wait, so like on the flat large side of the bus, so like the perpendicular side, so everyone's moving sideways inside that bus, is that right?
Yeah, so yeah, everyone sat looking to the left. So
Okay.
Everyone's facing the left, and they've got like a big sort of window, and everyone sat looking to the left, as if like it's as if like the bus itself isn't meant to be like that, and instead it's meant to be stationary, and then you just pull down the side of it, and then ta-da, you've got like a stage, you've got like seating you've brought to some sort of event somewhere. But instead, that's not the case. It's just always on wheels going around, and all these people are sitting sideways inside this bus, looking out at the left.
That's the funniest thing I've heard.
And they're all smiling and waving at you, and it felt Lynchian. It was so weird. Like it was almost to the degree where, because the window that they're looking at is slightly tinted, like windows normally are in that way, I could imagine it where it was fully tinted and they could see us, but we couldn't see them. which would be the end stage of that surreal nature. But if you told me all those people on that tiered seating all had guns under their seats, and they lowered down the window, I could see that.
Yeah,
it's more efficient than the comic book, actually.
That's wild. I'd never heard of that before. I've certainly never seen that in London.
We don't need it here.
We don't.
It was freaky.
Can you imagine if they were all like businessmen and they all had their suits on, all identical, like black and white suits, and they weren't even smiling or laughing? They were just sat there pointing out the side of the bus.
Yeah, I mean that adds an extra sinister tone to it.
God, I wish you hadn't told me that. That's horrible.
I wish I had gotten the picture, but I was just too horrified to even think about it. But like other elements, like as in like how society as a whole reacts to this system.
Yeah. So like for example, the live streaming thing, or like the nature of fans of streamers. I don't know if anything like that jumped out at you.
I guess in relation to, say, the Trotter character, who is this influencer, basically.
Like the PewDiePie of Hitmen.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And he is pretty good at what he does. He seems like he's number one, and for him, it's like a whole like literally a big show, but also it's metaphorically kind of a show as well. And he has this whole thing where he works with this associate called Cameron, who basically runs everything, and it's sort of like a PR person, but also the operations person, basically the person who's running the show, and like she's kind of like an agent as well, where it's like, oh, your views are up here, you should do this, and they have quite a like punchy relationship where there's degrees where you're unsure her investment in him, and if he's just a tool to make her rich. And what's cool with this character is that they're not just the stereotype of like, oh, douchebag streamer, blah blah. Because while he has all of those elements, we do spend some time with him just by himself, or him interacting with other people, and we get a sort of sense into the hollowness that he has, and the fact that it doesn't really seem like he has that much control, like creative control in his life. And for that, I mean, he's a complete douchebag, but it doesn't like excuse him, but more like explains what happens when you have someone who's like that, who's because of the nature of this, is kind of like an Evel Knievel type, take mad risks character, but also there's a lot of like game show host, lifestyle guru type thing. Like he's a whole brand, he's a walking brand, and you get like shades where it doesn't, we don't really understand, he doesn't really understand why he's doing what he's doing, or he thinks things are different to what they really are.
Yeah, because it's this thing of like how you get a flashback of how he kind of fell into this role that he has.
Yeah,
and it did remind me of streamers who, obviously you start off small, and then you have these people who like burst into popularity and then don't quite know what to do with it, and they're just taken along for the ride. And that's the sense I get from him, that it started off from quite small beginnings, under quite tragic circumstances. Like current day streamers, like you fall into popularity because you're playing a video game and you just so happen to resonate for whatever reason at that time. But if that resonant thing, if that instigation of your popularity was based on murder, like what that does to you, and then it does really inform the person he is now, and like the sadness he has in him. Because like there's really nice touches where it goes a different direction than you'd expect. Like he doesn't go full douchebag. It's like that somebody says to him, like he's having a party and somebody says, oh, we can get rid of all these people. He's like, no, I don't want to be alone. Like I want to be surrounded by all this life. I want all these people here. It's not just about being popular. It's about not being left in a room by yourself.
And there's also the element of I think it's Cameron who's like, oh, we can just like do this thing and it basically sorts the kill for you. And he's like, no, that's cheating. Like we can't do that. Like, people will find out and it will tear everything down. Like we got to do this the proper way.
But also having a fear of like the Reddit crowd, because he does say like the fans are worse than the FBI.
Yeah,
like they will find out every little dirty secret.
Like,
they'll
you
know
cannot hide.
Yeah, I think they do justice to these side characters with like giving them more depth than you could just easily get away with. You could give this character, you could give Trotter the simple douchebag facade and be done with it, but they go a couple of steps further, and I really admire that.
And it's like it kind of, I know, like I have like shades of like coaches who like abuse like their star sports players, and I mean abuse in the sense that
take advantage.
They take advantage of them, and like work them to the bone. And that they break them down mentally to make them think they're lesser than they are, so they can get the maximum of their physical abilities. And like the series of panels we get, which are like a recording of what feels like his first kill, and he doesn't know like what the hell's just happened, what the hell's just occurred, but he's just standing there fully bloodied with a knife in his hand, and it's like, you did it, dude, you did it. And like there's other people around who are benefiting off what he's just done as well. It is quite horrifying, really, because everyone around him is sort of just used that. He obviously has he's obviously really good at killing people for whatever trauma or reason, and that's just been used. And as you said, like, he's just been chipping at his soul the whole time.
And made all the worse that, like, the framing device for that specific story is because somebody, like a high spending fan, has spent money to get 20 minutes of FaceTime with Trotter, and he's like, what happened in your first kill? I heard you cried, you know. And then we get to see it. Like, of course, he's going through this emotional moment where he's murdered somebody and people are benefiting off the back of it. And like, he has to revisit this trauma because somebody wants to mock him for his emotion in that moment. Like, it's genuinely quite heartbreaking.
And he just, like, this sad assistant sort of like living off like sponsored energy drink.
Which reminded me of Greg a little bit, just like caning energy drink after energy drink.
The old days.
Yeah, in the old days, not now.
But yeah, it's I like that level of humanity that given to him, but not in a excuse your bad actions way. Instead, we just get more of the totality of a character.
Yeah, so the thing that I really appreciate with these kind of books is when they give lots of background detail that you kind of have to pick apart yourself, and you can read as much in or out of it as you want. So there's one in issue 3 where somebody is going through Charlie's DVR and like looking at the shows that she's been watching and essentially downloading but not actually getting the time to watch because she does so many jobs. But a lot of these are like reality TV shows with loads and loads of unwatched episodes. I think also one of them was, God, I can't remember what it's called, like an actual real life TV show that has hundreds of episodes and she hasn't watched 124 of them. However, there's one on that list which was called A Nation of Killers, and every single episode on that show is watched. So I wonder if that is going to hint at something about her personality, like the fact that she's been watching this show about killing, but neglecting all the ones that are about just, you know, general reality TV, like that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm reading too much into that, but that I thought was really interesting. The thing I was talking about earlier when it came to like the Kickstarter funding amount that she has on her head, it's like, in typical me fashion, I made a little spreadsheet of every number and the amount of people that was talked about in these first 3 days that we get in volume 1.
Yeah.
So it ranges from 1.2 million at approximately 2,000 people, all the way up to 2.4 million-ish to 7,000 people. And what I noticed was if you get the average dollar per person, it starts off at around 600 per person, and then immediately drops to like 400, and then by the third day is dropped to 300. And I think what that implies is that there's it must have been a core subset of like really high contributors to that value that immediately boosted how much money is put on our head. And I'm wondering what that implies about the conspiracy. Like somebody who is big must have dropped the money on, but as more and more people get on, you realize that they're contributing smaller and smaller amounts. And I like that hints at the idea that once you get this ball rolling, people will just contribute money because they want to. Like, it implies that people at the start put in really high amounts, and then at the end they're putting in like $5, $10. Even one of her friends says, "Oh, I didn't contribute. Oh no, actually I did. I put in like $5 worth." And like, just to be a part of it, and what that says about like this snowball effect of if you become popular, if it's like a big thing, if it looks like people are giving money to it, people just keep feeding money to it. And like, it's awful because like the popularity generates more popularity, and like it's just her hole is getting dug deeper and deeper just by virtue of it starting off on a really high hill. And like, that's terrifying to me. Like, if you can get people wanting to contribute to your murder just because you have already been established as the target of murder, like, I don't know, that's a really scary concept to me. People are just throwing money at it for no reason.
Yeah, because now it's like whatever the original reason is now moot. Now it's just entertainment. Now she's on TV, and people are just sort of following the bandwagon. It's like how there's like what what is the word? Petitions. That's it. Online petitions. How those in their early days they're really hard to get up to that threshold, but then you find that once they hit like the threshold, say it's 1 million, then a couple of days later you find out the thing's on 2 million now, and then on 3 million, 4 million, and I think there's like a psychology thing to being a bit more all in when you see other people have been.
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was getting at with this, because like if 1.2 million comes from only 2,000 people, and then by day 3 that value has doubled, but the amount of people has quadrupled because it goes up to almost 8,000 people. Like that implies something about the 6,000 people in the middle only like generating the same value from the beginning. Like I don't know, it's just wild to me. Like the same 1.2 million is generated by 2,000 people and then 6,000 people, and to amass that amount of like users is scary. And like I really hope that that's one of those touch points that the writers or the designers have actually considered, because I feel like that resonated with me really quite hard, because my job is to look at these kind of numbers in day-to-day life. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much in.
No, I think so. I mean, there's a reason that it's there. They would either just tell you the amount or tell you backers. I think there's a reason why those are there in concert with each other, and I think that it does mean a thing, and it is a comment that is being made.
Yeah, and that kind of detail really, I love those kind of things. I love it because I had to put in a bit of work to discover that, and I think it actually adds to the story, adds to the history of that plot, I think. We haven't talked much about visually how this comic performs. Like one of the things I wanted to point out, and it's and the reason it came to mind is because it's on a page that I'm looking at right now in issue 6, where there's some really interesting onomatopoeia going on in this book. Like constantly, the sound effects are like visually. You get like explosions, which are drawn in letters that say kabloom or kapow or whatever. There's one that I'm looking at right now where there's somebody's firing off a machine gun, and you're getting like rat-a-tata or like all these B's and R's and T's and stuff. And every single hole in those letters, so like the hole in the A or the 2 holes in the B, are formed of bullet casings. And like I didn't even pick up on that the first time, but like there's so much of that peppered throughout this book that I just think the amount of energy that's gone into giving you something to look for in the backgrounds of each of these panels is really rewarding.
Yeah, and it speaks to why the letterer is one of the people credited as one of the creators as well. It feels like a full ensemble have come together to express this story.
Yeah, because that's not the kind of thing you could do in isolation. Like you'd have to be, like metaphorically or not, in the room together. Like you'd have to be discussing that back and forth, and then like the artist would have to leave space for the letterer to put that kind of stuff in. And
yeah, like it has to be a core consideration.
Yeah, this is when I wish comic books had behind the scenes like documentaries and stuff. I would love to see how this one got made.
Yeah, because it would be cool to have like I don't know, like strip panel naked or type documentary into the various stages of the book coming together.
Yeah, because the reason I had it in mind was because I was watching like the final days of documentaries that you have on YouTube about video games. I would really like to see more of that kind of, because obviously you can get interviews with people, you can get their thoughts and their spiel at the end of each comics. Like people often give storyboards or like sketches and like the scripts, like excerpts of those. But I really want to see like actual deep dive, how you would get with a movie, like a 2-hour documentary about how this thing was created. I would love to see that. But also since I brought up stuff about like lettering and background detail, did you find that some of the speech bubble layout was a bit confusing at points? Like there were a couple of occasions where I felt like two people were having a dialogue, but their individual bubbles were placed in a way that kind of broke up the flow and like made me have to go back and forth and think which order things were being said in. It's one of those things that I really don't notice until it's not working for me. And I think it only happened like 2 or 3 times in this book over the course of these 6 issues. But there was a moment where I was really confused about what was happening because of that. Like, I don't know if you picked up on anything like that.
To memory, there was one splash page early on where I originally read it in what I assume is the correct order, but then thought, possibly I haven't actually. And then I think it's where they first go to Vita's house.
Oh, right.
And they're walking through it. I think there's a point there where the right or down thing overlap in a way because of where the characters they're doing that thing where the characters are all there but at different points in time in that one splash. Because of that, I read it correctly the first time, but then before leaving the page I was like, oh, did I? And then read it again in the wrong order, and then I was like, no, I was right the first time. Where that is an example of me coming into that thing. But I think it's because that particular page is quite different, quite unconventionally laid out.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a Wimmel buildery type thing where it's like a crosscut of that. Like imagine if it had corridors at the front of the house going across each level, and then it sliced through that corridor, so you get to see Vita and Charlie walking from the top level of the house and spiraling down through those corridors, and then you kind of get to see into each room at the same time through that. I think I had a similar reaction on this page as well, where because the speech bubbles are kind of not laid out in an obvious arc, I could see why you would be confused about what order things were happening in. But I guess you could read it in either direction as well. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's not quite honed enough to feel like it could be messy or not. I feel like it's just, I don't know, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's not quite considered enough to be fully readable. I don't know. I think I had a couple of moments in this book, and that was one of my only sour points on this book so far.
Were there during splashes as well, or they during just normal pages?
No, I think there was a couple where it was just normal pages where like you would expect dialogue bubbles to be interleaved with each other, so like very obviously stacked. And I think there were a couple of occasions where they weren't. They were just a bit too far apart that it wasn't inherently obvious who was talking when. And I don't know. It's one of those things you don't notice it until you notice it. And I don't know. It took me out of the book just a little bit. I think I've said all I need to say on this book. I don't know if you've got any more points that you'd want to touch on.
Just some things that I would probably go back on. I think we've mentioned it before, but to lean in a bit more, the character designs are amazing in this book. It's a mix of a few things. I like the diverse body types we're getting in this, and they're not commented on as a thing. Like it's not this character's this size or shape because of whatever. I think we have the way the relationships are set out on this are how we generally get basic heterosexual relationships. But these ones are not. They're like bi and lesbian, but it's not.
They're not calling attention to it because they're bi or lesbian.
Instead, they're treated how straight relationships are generally treated, and that is quite nice, but not nice in a novel way, but nice in that the characters feel more real because of this.
It's kind of refreshing because, like, as much as I admire books which have that front and center, I think it's nice that it's understated and quite natural. Like, these relationships exist, and they don't have to be like pointed out every time they're on screen or on page.
Yeah, and I think particularly with Vita and her ex, who's the cop, their relationship does give us some more insight into Vita, which I quite like, and she gets to be more what's the word? She gets to be more emotional in a sense, because she's quite not stern, I guess, to a degree, but because she's all business, because her job is to keep someone alive, and that person's very annoying. Even then, we see her like break a little bit and like soften and explain a bit more about herself reluctantly as Charlie falls asleep anyway. But the relationship she has with the cop, her ex, gives us an extra like dimension to the issues that they would have had during their relationship, and where they butt heads and what it says about both characters. And I just love how that stuff is rendered, and I love the design of like all these different characters. I love the colors, especially. I think the color throughout is really good, and it pops in really cool ways. There's like a theming to certain panels, but then I also love when characters are just having a conversation, and instead of getting background, we just get like lightly gradation of like a big like plum or like purpley or fuchsia just in the background instead of it being white.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of like really intense, like vibrant color work going on, which I really like, especially because so many of these scenes are set during firefights or like nightclubs and stuff, and it allows for that vivid color work. I really love Vita's colors in general, because she has like the yellow jacket and the yellow shoes, and there's a point where you get to look inside her wardrobe, and it's basically just alternating yellow and gray, which is it's basically her outfit in every single issue so far. And I like that they give that moment to it.
Yeah, and I love how that color theming works in like the speech bubble way, when characters are speaking off screen, and we just know immediately who's talking because of the characters themselves have like their own themes, like how Charlie is a Caucasian presenting person, but she's like literally pink, and then has like vibrant pink hair as well. And like pink clothing, and I love like strong character-based colors. I think it does a lot.
And like a lot of the characters do have their own palette. So like Vita having yellow in her like her clothing, and also her car, which is like a big block bright yellow. Charlie being pink. There's also some of the hitmen. There's one person who is like has a green theming. And even then, some of the incidental characters, like there's I can't remember which issue it is later on, but like you get a scene where it's like people who you don't actually know, they're like incidental characters. Each one of them has their own little colored background as well. I like that it's consistent. It's not just the protagonists or your main characters who get given that treatment. Like there's a lot of effort gone into like making everything look that colorful and diverse.
Yeah, and just on top of that, it's just nice to see so many different shades, and especially so many like brown shades of characters, and it's not even a thing. It's just these characters. It's nice, and it's nice to look at.
It's interesting because like that's the kind of thing that is either I don't know how I want to put this. Like it's either you're a person who's living that, and that's your truth, and then you put it on page, and it's almost easy to be able to represent all these different, like the spectrum of humanity, because you know it and you live it. Or it's doing a magic trick where it takes an awful lot of consideration to make this feel natural. And I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think you have to think about these things. And then I really do appreciate the amount of thinking that has gone into making this look, I don't know, like the way we would see the world. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like it could be so easily done wrong if you overthink it, or you underthink it, or you try and over-egg the situation by making it too diverse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's a mix of like the art team living their truth, but also I think there is an intention just to present the world as as it appears, but
Mm.
also to not fall into the whole thing of like, okay, here's a character, default white type thing.
Yeah, I think the thing, the touchstone that I had when I was reading it was it doesn't feel like a 90s high school magazine. You know what I mean? Where you have like the quote unquote diverse cast of people on the front of that cover. And like it feels inherently wrong somehow because you know that it's done in a cynical or like um I don't know, cynical or patronizing kind of way. I feel like
Where
this
it's the United Colors of Benetton type thing.
yeah, exactly that. Like I didn't get any hint from this book of that at all. Like it felt supernatural. Like really super space natural, not
Yeah,
supernatural.
I think a lot of that is because we're getting different shades of the same in terms of characters we're looking. So it's the classic thing of like, if you want to, like, people complain with this stuff saying like, oh, well, I guess I can't make the black character evil because that'll be racist. And it's like, well, no, it's just a case of like being mindful of the history of that representation. But then also, if you create this cool character, blah, blah, just make it so that they're not the only spokesperson for their like race or ethnicity.
Yeah, for sure. Like the diversity is genuinely diverse. Like there's such a spectrum of different shapes, skin tones, hair, like hairstyles, all of these different things that it's like genuinely spread. Like there's so many different variants,
Like
which
gender expression as well.
yeah. I think I really admire. I assume there's effort gone into this, and I admire the effort.
Yeah, and like just on top of that, just to make all the characters look really cool as well. Like the green-lipped assassin, don't know what their deal is, but they are pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what their deal is, which I assume we'll get in the next volume.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, because we followed that character for a good couple of issues, and all we really see is them on the approach, like investigating, but not actually engaging or intersecting with Charlie or Vita yet.
Yeah.
They're just sat in the background watching things unfold and like
observing
and waiting for opportunity. I think is what it is, and I'm really looking forward to when that opportunity comes along, because they seem hyper capable. Like all these, I love the touches of like when they go to scan their credit card or whatever, and you get the flash of transmission failed. Oh no, then transmission succeeded. Like they've clearly got talent in hacking these systems and making things work for them, or like stealing somebody's bicycle, and then you get to see in the background like somebody chasing after it. Things like that. Like I just want to see the extent of this person's capabilities, because they seem so much more put together than like the other hitmen we've seen so far.
Yeah, definitely. Like the fact that we're getting this slow burn and slow like reveal with this character, to the fact that we're 6 issues in and we don't even know their name. I'm excited to what the true intention of them is, and in some degrees more so than whatever it is that Charlie's hiding, to be honest. Because I with these characters, I want to spend time with them, but not for like any mystery box reason. So I'm hoping that the reveal of that is a more elegant thing and not some original sin conspiracy government thing.
Yeah, I mean that's not the main draw for me anyway, but I'm looking forward to what that is. With this particular character, I had shades of, because they haven't acted in malice or in like, I mean they've done some malicious things, but like they haven't acted in the ultimate like I'm gonna kill Charlie sort of way yet. I wonder if they're a secret ally somehow. Like that's gonna be the flip, is that they're following in order to try and save them at some point, and like maybe
that's the thing. I could see that as well, because even their actions to the people who were doing like the Airbnb in the apartment, it was just knock you out so you're out of my way while I do my business, and then sorry for the mess, see you later.
Yeah.
Like, normally in these type of fictions, those people are dead.
Yeah, because they'd be like ultimately ruthless and like doing things just for their own progression. But yeah, they seem quite like willing to take the extra step to not murder people, which is interesting for a hitman. So yeah, I want to see what develops there. I guess should we cut it off there? Unless you have anything else to add.
No, I think between this and our review of the first issue, we've covered a lot of the bases here. If you're listening to this and you've not read the first volume, I would highly recommend it regardless, because I think that even though we've gone through some like plot details and stuff, there's not really like big story like spoiler reveal stuff really that's even taken place here. So I think that you could still go in having quite a fresh experience, getting different sort of panel to panel reveals instead. So I would definitely recommend picking up this book. It's really good.
Yeah, echoing what Leon just said, I think there's a real joy to just experiencing this book, and I think that's something I find hard to find in comics sometimes. I think that's the thing that I bounce off of occasionally, is that the moment to moment, the actual act of reading from panel to panel, I can occasionally find quite frustrating, whereas this felt very refreshing. It felt very like I was enjoying that process. Like Leon was saying, the panel to panel reveals are really good, and I think you'll still get something out of that, even having listened to us. So I would concur. Really heavy recommendation for this book. And yeah, so that was us talking about Crowded Volume 1, and I believe by the time this episode comes out, there will have been 10 issues, but not Volume 2 yet. I think Volume 2 is going to be early 2020.
Yeah, seems about right.
So yeah, let's wrap it up. I've completely forgotten the spiel that Greg gives at the end of these episodes, but essentially what it boils down to is you can see all of our work on acecomicals.com. You can contact us either via Twitter or at acecomicals, or you can reach us on our email, which is
acecomicals@gmail.com.
Thanks, Leon. acecomicals@gmail.com. Where can we get in touch with you online, Leon?
Find me mostly on Twitter. I'm extremely online at Leon Everett.
Yeah, echoing that, I'm also extremely online, but you'll find me not using my real name on Twitter at Monkeh. So that's at MOONKEH. We'll leave you there. This has been Ace Comicals episode 77. Over and out. Cool. I've stopped recording.
I will tell Craig to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, leave it out, Craig.
Bye, Craig.